everyone, this is Build Series, and I'm your host, Brittany Jones-Cooper. New York Times bestselling author Sylvia Day is here today to chat about her new book, Butterfly and Frost. It's a page-turner that is both emotional and really steamy, and I know because I read it. Please put your hands together for Sylvia Day. First, I have to just really applaud you on that balance, how this is the first book of yours I've read, and it will not be the last. And I say that, yeah, very truthfully, because there is this balance of just, you're very locked into the characters, and you're on a very emotional ride. But then, you know, you pop in there with those steamy love scenes, and those are fun too.
Yeah, we like to have a little fun with those, right? Yeah. But I think most romantic relationships have that sexual component. And for characters like mine, where they're dealing with emotional trauma, a lot of times they can't communicate verbally. Yeah. So, you know, the easiest way for them to discuss, you know, these feelings that they're having for each other is non-verbally. So the sexual relationship in the books oftentimes allows the characters to see these emotions that they're having without them verbalizing them to each other.
That makes so much sense. Before we really dig into this book, I know that your last book was released in 2016.
Yeah.
So we're 2019. So what was that time in between? What is that process like, just sort of working on a new book and getting it out?
Partly, you know, working on a new book, and in this case, multiple books. So, you know, there's another series that's in the works in addition to writing Butterfly and Frost. I was also coming off of writing the Crossfire series, which was 5 books in 4 years, and they were very long, very thick books, and a world tour that went with each one of those releases. So I wasn't home for a lot of those 4 years. And then, you know, my family needed me to be home for the last 3 years. You know, both of my children had surgeries that they went through. My mother was diagnosed with lymphoma. So life happens. You know, things happen to your family, and you need to be home and present and aware. And I needed to take the time to recharge creatively and set up the new series that I was working on, work on this book. So a lot of things came into play to taking that time.
I was going to say, taking that break just to live your life a little bit too, you know, and just sort of let that creativity work. I would imagine that's important when you're writing so often.
Yes. I mean, writers take inspiration from life. So if you're not living, then you're not being inspired and you're not creating a new book. So you really have to separate yourself for a little bit from the actual grind of sitting at a computer and looking at a screen.
Yeah. And that's why we have this greatness, because this book is so, like I said, it is a page turner. And I want to know, where did the idea come from?
I've been wanting to work on this particular story for a while. So in the case of Garrett, he is a bereaved parent. So that particular topic, I like to deal with characters who are survivors. That was a topic that I wanted to touch on, and I've been wanting to work on it for many years. But it's a topic that I also understand can be depressing. So how do I tell that story in a way that's still entertaining for readers to where they pick it up? I understand that when somebody picks up a book, they're trying to get an escape from their life. So you don't want to escape into something that's depressing. So it took a long time for me to figure out how to tell this story in a way that could touch readers, that would do justice to the topic, and yet would still allow readers to put it down and say, I feel uplifted, you know, I feel inspired, you know, it was a great book. That took a while.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, each of the characters is really on a journey of their own.
Yes.
Teagan as well, she's a woman who's very much trying to, like, find herself.
Yes.
She's, you know, been through a separation or a divorce, and you can tell she's trying to rebuild, and she doesn't know if she's ready for love again.
Right.
And I think that's really important for a lot of people, because a lot of people are doing work on themselves, and they don't know quite when is that time to open up their heart again.
Right. And she's suffering from depression. And for her, sometimes it's debilitating depression, where she completely checks out of life for a while. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. Even if they don't have depression that completely removes them from everyday living, as happens to her sometimes, they would all relate to having days where we just don't want to connect with anybody. So how do you go from being a person who's not connecting with life at all to having a very intimate personal relationship with somebody? Yeah. And that's where she's at.
So how do you balance that, having these two characters who are so complicated, have so many things, and they're sort of coming together, and that tension is so palpable? What is the art of creating tension in the way that you do? Because it is an art.
There's always the question of will they or won't they, right? That really is where the tension comes in, right? Is will they or won't they? Will they work it out or won't they? And in my case, I try to get that question out of the way right away. Yeah. And then the question is, okay, now that they have, is it sustainable? Because, you can have a sexual relationship with somebody and not have the rest of the ingredients to make the relationship work. That's the fascinating part of any sort of character study. And for me, that's what writing a book is about, is a character study. Let's look at these two people. Let's fit the puzzle together.
Yeah. And it's more, like you said, than just sex in a lot of ways. I mean, everything is sort of like tense in the dynamic. You can feel it. Even, I think in chapter 5, there was a moment where like they open a sliding glass door and like the breeze hits her face. And I was like, oh. Just because the whole scene was, so it's not even overtly sexual in a lot of ways. It's just like they're in this space and you can feel these two people sort of vibing. And that's it's really a joy to read and be so engaged.
Yeah, for her in that moment, she feels like, oh, we've let some air into like this very, tight, tense space. Like literally we've let some air into the space, but also, there's the tactile sensation of feeling, the wind on your skin. And, now maybe we can kind of open things up a little bit, let some breathing room into the situation.
Are those things you've really had to sort of evolve and learn over the years as a romance novelist? Like, do you look back at maybe some of your earlier works and how you've sort of learn to sort of craft these scenes and make them feel really accessible and real without being kind of like maybe over the top, or, you know what I mean? They're very rooted in reality in a lot of ways.
Definitely. I look at some of my earlier works and go, wow, I had a long way to go, and sometimes, readers who just discover me like you have with this book, they'll go back and read some of my earlier works and they'll go, oh, you can kind of see the genesis, right? There's like the start of what she's developing into as a writer. So you pick on some of these things, that you're good at, and you start to strengthen those things. You focus on them and you develop them, make them better. And then you learn to stay away from the things that you're not so great at. Let's not put too much of that in there because I'm just not that good at it. And then you listen to your readers, what it is that they are connecting to in your books, what is important to them, what they took away from your story, and then you try to deliver more of that.
What is your relationship like with your readers? I know you get to interact with them. So what do they come and tell you, or what is it about your style of writing or the genre that they really connect to?
It's different for every reader. There's some readers who found me because they were in the hospital with a family member who was ill, and, the book was in the hospital, in the gift shop. They picked it up. It took them out of that moment for a little bit, so it was an escape. For other characters, for other readers, the character has a story that is important to them. I've heard from bereaved parents already who connected to Garrett's story, and they took inspiration from the fact they never thought of themselves as being a romance character. Like, wow, you could tell a positive story about somebody who's been through something like I have, which gives them hope that they can turn a corner and do something similar, with their lives. Maybe it's not a romance, maybe it's the message is not, I'm going to, turn around tomorrow and there's going to be a hot guy that moves in next door necessarily. But it's like, I can look forward to a brighter future. I can find a happier next day, a happier tomorrow. So I hear a lot of that. And for some, it's like your female characters are really strong. They have high-powered jobs. They're well-educated. They're very demanding of their partners as far as, I want this in a relationship. These are the things that I'm looking for. For some women, they say, it taught me I deserve better. I can ask for, more things. I left a really bad relationship because I think I deserve to have the type of relationship that these characters are having. So everybody takes away something a little bit different. But, my signature lesson really is just to live life, embrace it, and that we're all going to have these pitfalls. We're all going to suffer these traumas. We're all going to survive something in some way or another. And we're still going to keep going, and it will get better. There's a high and a low, and the high is coming around the corner.
I do like you mentioned the strong women, and Teagan is very successful in her own right. And you made the decision of making her kind of a reality star.
Mm-hmm.
So is that something you've been thinking about for a while, or was that just sort of a fun thing you thought about?
There was just something I threw in there, really. And somebody was like, well, what was her inspiration? Honestly, it was Dr. Pimple Popper. Oh. And and Teagan is a plastic surgeon, so she's not popping pimples. But I loved watching Dr. Sandra Lee and her relationship with her patients. Mm-hmm. She is so kind, and she understands that sometimes having a physical ailment or something about yourself physically can cause you to have a lower self-esteem. And maybe, if we can fix this for you, you can feel better about yourself, feel better about your life, tackle your life with more, vigor and be happier. So I wanted to kind of instill that into Teagan, because she's not really doing that for herself. So it's like she's practicing it, but she's not really living it. And I think a lot of us have a tendency to do that sometimes.
Definitely when you're not living it. And then sometimes you have friends, though, who remind you of how great you are, which is why I really liked Roxanne as well, her friend.
Yeah.
Just the importance of when you are going through a hard time and just having somebody who's going to get you out of the house or get you kind of engaged back in life. I just like that dynamic and the importance of female friendships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, having somebody who's there for you, who can push you a little bit sometimes, and then also know when to back off, which Roxy definitely knows when it's time, okay, I'm being a little pushy, I understand. But yeah, I mean, sometimes, you need to be there for your friends and say, you know what, maybe it's time, I've kind of let you do your own thing for a little bit, but now it's time to
come to dinner.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah, let's go. Let's do something.
So you mentioned all of the different books you're writing, whether they're series or this one. What is your sort of process like? Are you super disciplined? Do you always write in the same room or the same? How do you sort of get yourself to exercise that muscle every day? Because I know a lot of people are frustrated writers, and you seem to be churning out an extreme amount of content.
Yeah, well, I used to, right? I used to put out 2 full-length novels a year plus 2 novellas. So obviously that's slowed down a lot since it's been about 3.5 years since my last book, before we got Butterfly and Frost. So it's slowed down a bit. But that's because I understand that readers expect the same experience that they had before, but they also don't want the same experience that they had before. You got to up your game, right? Yeah, you got to bring a little bit more. That requires a lot more work on my part, a lot more introspection. I need to continue to surprise you and yet still deliver the same signature experience. So it's like making a recipe that everybody loves, but making it better every time you come over, and yet not going so far that I've ruined it somehow. So it's a lot. It's a lot of work. I move around a lot. Obviously, I travel a lot, so I don't have a set place where I work, but I have set conditions. So it has to be very quiet. I have to be physically comfortable where I'm at. So sometimes I'm at a desk, and I may work at a desk for a couple hours, but then I may move to a sofa, I may move to a bed, wherever. It has to be very quiet. So some people write to music. I can sometimes have the television on in the background, but it really has to be something where I'm not paying attention to it. It can't be something I'm engrossed in. So a movie I've seen 100 times, that'll work, but not something that I'm really interested in. And that's about it, Do
you make yourself write a certain amount of pages every day, or it is just sort of whatever comes out, comes out?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because some days I may write 1 page, and some days I'll write 10, 20 pages. Some days I'll write for 24 hours straight, and some days I'll sit there and nothing happens. And I used to get so frustrated because a day would go by and nothing would happen, and then 2 days and 3 days. And then I'd be like, oh, I'm having a writer's block moment or something, what's going on? And then I realized that, no, it's just kind of percolating, it's kind of developing. And then one day I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write for 3 days straight. And, that's when the kids are coming by and going, hey, haven't seen you in a while. Are you okay in there? You gonna eat, maybe change something, I don't know. Yeah. So I've learned to trust that process, but then I've been a published author for 15 years. So I've learned over time that there will be another book coming. In the beginning, it was very scary. Yeah, it was very scary because it was maybe there was times where I'd go, maybe I've written every book there was to write. maybe there's nothing left in me. I had a conversation with my editor once where I'm like, maybe I'm done. Maybe I've written the last book that there was. And she said, that is ridiculous. Like, disconnect from the computer, go to the movies, hang out with your kids, go on vacation, read a book, do something. I'm going to call you in 2 weeks. We'll see how you're feeling. And she was right, just stepping away from the computer, getting out, doing things. And that's when I learned that really living is so important to writing.
I think that's so important for people to hear, because writing can be a really immersive experience, like you mentioned. You can be, and then I think sometimes when you have that finished product, you're like, all right, that's all I had. That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
That's everything.
Yes.
And then how old are your kids?
I have a 20-year-old and I have an 18-year-old.
Gotcha. So have they read any of your books, or do they kind of understand your voice?
No, but all of their teachers are reading my books. All of their friends' mothers are reading my books. For my son, girls that they know are reading my books. So, they're familiar with what's going on. Yeah, they haven't gotten to that point yet.
Is that just because they're like, no, Mom, or?
Yeah, they're a little worried, I think. They know they're sexy, and I think there's just things they just don't want to know that their mom knows. Right. So they're like, yeah, we'll just hold off on that.
Well, let me tell you, they're missing out for sure.
It took my mom a while too, and she's a huge romance reader. She's the one that got me into reading romance, which got me into writing romance. And for years, she couldn't read my work because she couldn't divorce the daughter from the writer. So she had such a hard time with that. And then eventually one day she said she just got so into the story, she forgot who it was. So now she's, separated the two. There's the author and then there's the daughter. So, when I'm getting a lecture, sometimes as the daughter, I'm like, could you think of me as the writer? Maybe I won't get lectured. It never ends up getting, it doesn't work that way. But yeah, my dad can't do it at all. He's tried. And I told him, please, Dad, you can stop. But he's determined. He's determined. And he sent me an email once, and he's like, I don't know if you can tell from the email how red my face is as I'm writing this, but it is glowing on my monitor on this end. I can't. I'm trying. I can't. I'm like, Dad, it's okay. He's like, I just don't want to know that you know these things. I'm like, it's okay. It's all right. But I do have 2 children. You realize this, right?
You're a mother,
so... at some point something happened, right? So...
that is fantastic. But it's not that they can still, root you on and just probably maybe not.
Oh, my dad is an expert at going to the bookstores and rearranging the books so that it's where he thinks they should be. Yeah. Yes.
That's fair. That's good, Dad.
Yeah. And then he loves to send me a little text and say, I moved your books around, takes a little picture. I'm like, go, Dad.
The first thing I thought when I read this too, like so many people these days, is like, oh, I would watch this movie. But I know there's probably a lot of complications in translating maybe a book like this into film, right? I mean, do you feel like it would lose maybe some of its impact?
Sometimes, I have had a book that was adapted, and there was an interesting process. It's like a 400-page book. You get a script, and it's like 98 pages. And you're looking at it, and it's mostly just lines of dialogue, and it's only certain lines of dialogue, and a lot of it's left to interpretation by the actors, and then, of course, what the director's giving them, and then the vision is really turned over to prop masters and whoever is coming up with wardrobe and that sort of stuff. You hope that it ends up in the hands of somebody who is kind of trying to realize your vision, but of course, what you see in your head is not always what they see in their head, and so you have to divorce yourself a little bit from the material at that point. And of course, you have to trust that the actor can convey externally what's happening internally. So it's an interesting process. And with romance particularly, it's character-driven stories. Unlike a thriller or horror, murder mystery, what's driving the story is the evolution of these characters. That's all internal. That's very difficult to translate to the screen. Yeah, so you have a lot of rom-coms because there's a lot of comedic things that are happening externally. More serious romance is a little harder to convey. You don't see a lot of it, and that's why. But we always hope, I was
gonna say, is that something, I know, and I have seen that you've done it before, is that something you would be willing to do again?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And we're always talking about it. It's always something that's in discussion because nowadays especially so many studios are doing book to film. It's becoming very popular right now. So they're always approaching and talking about it, and we're always interested in hearing what different people's takes are on the material. Finding the right take, though, is it's hard.
It is just a testament to your writing, because as I was reading it, I was really able to visualize a lot of it, especially in Washington and the Puget Sound, and just all of the sort of the settings you create are very visual to read. So I immediately saw it as a film as well.
I think it's very important for the setting to be a character in the book. Yeah.
Why did you decide to set it in Washington?
Well, one, I have a place there. She lives in my house. So when you read the description of Teagan's home, that's my house. So I can kind of really show you what that looks like because I see it. I'm looking at it. I'm describing it. But I felt it was really important, especially my previous series, Crossfire series, was set here in New York. And, of course, New York was a very large character in that book. If you're going to set a book somewhere, there should be a reason why you've set it somewhere. It shouldn't just be an arbitrary place that you've picked. And for me, the Seattle area, the Pacific Northwest, just that outdoorsy place, the peacefulness of it, just the space around it seemed like a place where somebody who is escaping would go. And it fit her.
It also makes me kind of want to see your house.
Yeah.
Because the house sounds really beautiful in the book. She has it right there.
I mean, if you love mid-century, I fell in love with the house. I was really fortunate to have found it.
Yeah. Well, before we go, we do have a couple of questions.
Sure.
The first one comes from Twitter. Sweet TMB asks, are the Crossfire characters in other books to find out what happened? Are the Crossfire characters in other books to find out what happened in detail during those 7 years? Maybe, do you quite understand that?
Nope, I understand it.
Okay, good. Okay. I was making sure you got it.
Yes, because the Crossfire series, even though it was written over the span of...
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
It was written over the span of 4 years. The actual time span of the books was only a few months. So the first book was written in 2012, so the actual series was set in 2012, which, let me tell you, as time moved on, making sure that I wasn't referencing, songs or television series, whatever that wasn't around then, became more and more difficult. And then writing Butterfly and Frost, which is present day, meant that there was a gap of 7 years. I have not obviously written books that cover that time span. That doesn't mean that I won't.
When you're writing a series, do you already have everything mapped out, or does it sort of reveal
Kind
itself?
of, sort of. I mean, for me, I'm not a plotter. I'm what we call in the writing industry a pantser, somebody who writes by the seat of their pants. So I just kind of sit down and the story starts to develop. A lot of times I don't know what's going to happen when I'm writing, so I'll be typing and I'll start talking to the book because I'm surprised. So I sometimes start yelling profanity at this because I'm like, what just happened? Why did that just happen? So sometimes readers go, why did you do this? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how that happened. So sometimes it's planned and sometimes it's not. But overall, all of my books, all of them are set in the same universe. They're all set, from vampires, werewolves, futuristics, historicals, they're all set in the same place. So yes, there's overlapping, and you'll see, things that happen in one book that'll explain something you didn't see in another book.
Your mind must be a really wonderful place.
It's a little weird.
Yeah,
that's what my kids say.
I'm
it's a little weird.
it though. That's fantastic. Yelling, you're surprising yourself, which would be.
Yeah, it's a little weird sometimes. My kids are like, "Are you talking to me, or are you talking to the book again?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm talking to the book again."
That's amazing. Where's our first question? Right here.
Well, I'm going to go back to earlier about Crossfire. Fans are wanting to know if you're going to still pursue a movie for that.
We are always in talks for Crossfire. I mean, it's never not on the plate, but we've never wanted to develop it as a motion picture because we've always felt that the length, an hour and a half to 2 hours would not be enough. So we've always looked at it as a long-running series.
Got it.
So at that point, you need a showrunner who is the person who's in charge of a pool of writers, right, which really controls the creative direction. And we have been searching for the right showrunner for since 2012. But there's always people who are interested in the job, and we're always interested in listening to their takes on the material, and I'm certain that eventually we are going to find the right person, and once that happens, then I think things will move very quickly.
You'll have a lot of happy people.
Yeah, I'm excited. Well, I mean, then the search for Gideon begins.
Oh, that's even harder. Well,
Yeah.
Henry.
Right?
Cavill.
Yeah. He's the front runner. He's the fan choice, yes.
Can you disclose who you would think, or would that complicate?
Yeah, he's always been my first choice, but that was in 2012. It's a 28-year-old character, so you know now it's like we'll have to figure it out.
That was the face while you were reading it.
I like that. I'm gonna go read that. I like him. All right. Next question. Over here.
Hi. So thank you for the updates on the Crossfire characters.
Sure.
I have 8,000 people screaming thank you in our group, our fan group.
Oh.
So my question is, these characters, do you plan to continue their story, or is this a standalone?
It is a standalone in that I'm not going to be writing another Teagan and Garrett story. But of course they do work for Ava,
Right.
and Ireland is getting a series, so
we'll see them again.
yes.
Okay. And the mind blown at the end was just amazing.
Yay! That's
Did
what
not see it coming.
Good. I was hoping you wouldn't. That was the plan. So I mean, it was really hard because typically when I'm writing a book, I will send it in small chunks to the editor, and we edit as we go. Because once I complete a story, I can't go back and edit through it. I will have to do a complete rewrite. So I never complete the book and then turn it in, because if there's a big rewrite done, that's like a completely new story. This one I had to turn it in complete to see if I did it right. So it was like either it worked or I have to put the whole thing aside and write a whole nother book. So when I got the email from her where she went, wait, what? I'm like, yes, okay, good. All right.
Usually you can see twists coming, but this one you don't
Couldn't,
see.
right? And then it makes you want to read it all over again.
Well, that was my
then-
plan.
I'm on the
right?
third time now, so.
Yeah, it is almost a book that you have to read at least twice.
My hope was that you would read it and have a particular experience the first time. And then when you read it the second time, it would be a completely different book, so that you would get two stories in one.
Thank you.
I told you, her brain's a beautiful place. Next one, right there.
Hi. I want to first say thank you for all the wonderful, empowering characters that you provide, and the many hours of reading that I have done on your books.
Thank you.
At one time, you had stated some favorites, and so The Stranger and I Married, Pride and Pleasure, Ask for It. Is this a new favorite?
This book, yes. This book really, because of what they're going through, and especially what Garrett is going through, yes, absolutely. Because typically with romance, we expect that, you know, boy meets girl or whatever it would happen to be, and they fall in love and they get married, they have children, they live happily ever after. That's not everybody's story, and I believe that you should be able to pick up a love story and have it be your story, no matter what your situation may be. And I didn't think that this story was being told for people who were in their situation, so I was happy to be able to have the opportunity to tell this story.
Lovely. Thank you.
Really
Yeah, sure.
Special. That's really special. I've never thought about that. You know, you should be able to, just as you can look at a show and feel seen in a character, the books are the same way, especially with romance. There isn't like a one-size-fits-all to finding love or keeping love or...
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, what happens if you did have your happily ever after and it wasn't happily ever after, you know? Exactly. Does that mean you're not going to get a second chance at having happily ever after? I think you should.
Isn't it so hard to talk without spoiling anything?
It is. It is. Yeah, it is. It's
Guys,
one of those
just
books.
trust us. Read the book because you will not regret it. All of these twists and turns will really blow your mind, and you'll walk away feeling really connected to these two characters and other people who may be experiencing something similar. So again, congratulations on this. It really is a beautiful piece of work. And if you guys want to check it out, Butterfly and Frost is available now wherever books are sold. Put your hands together for Sylvia Day.